Text installation partitioning. Perhaps the most intricate part of the Ubuntu text installation process is based on manual partitioning. When you get to that point during the text mode installation, you'll see this menu. The LVM shown in this menu is associated with logical volume management, a concept beyond what I can explain in this video. If you're unfamiliar with logical volume management, please review it on your own. In general, if you select one of the guided partitioning options, the Ubuntu installer, depending on the label shown here, will either use the entire disk, or in some cases you'll see an option to use available free space. Once it uses its own algorithm to create partitions, you'll see a confirmation screen similar to that shown here. Alternatively, if you select manual partitioning, you're presented with a menu similar to that shown here. You'll want to configure partitions for your directories, RAID arrays or logical volumes in available free space. For the purpose of this video, I've already created a couple of swap partitions. So to complete this process, I'll need to create partitions in this 8.2 gigabytes of available free space. When you select the free space, you're prompted to select the size of the partition. As shown here, you're prompted to configure it as a primary or logical partition, and in another screen not shown at the beginning or at the end of the drive. Then you can configure how the partition will be formatted, mounted, and more. The partition settings menu here is quite detailed and versatile. The Use As option is associated with the file format, the default for Ubuntu Linux, and many other standard Linux systems is the third extended file system, also known as X3. Other format options are available, such as X2, even Microsoft's BFAT. You can select Use As to set up this partition as a logical volume, a member of a RAID array, or as dedicated swap space. If you haven't already done so, and I did as shown a moment ago, you'll want at least one partition for swap space. The mount point is the directory you'll want to use for that partition. I've set this up on the top level root directory as indicated by the /. This option does not exist naturally if you've set up this partition as swap space, as a logical volume, or a member of a RAID array. Next, the mount options. They're associated with how the partition will be mounted. These are the options you see in the etc/fstab configuration file. Next, the label. It's used on some distributions. It's a common option on Red Hat distributions, but it's not commonly used on Ubuntu Linux. Reserved blocks. This is reserved space for the top-level root administrative user. Typical usage. Options in this section can customize blocks for different kinds of files. The bootable flag is commonly associated with partitions which contain the boot directory. These are the basic options for partitioning during the text mode installation process for the Ubuntu installer. I urge you to look through these options in more detail, as a full understanding of these options may be fair game during the exam. More installation options. As partitions are formatted, especially if there was already an existing installation on the current hard drive, once you pass this point here and say yes, you wouldn't be able to go back once you say yes and the changes are written to the hard drives. At that point, the installation proceeds and can take a few minutes or more, depending on the speed of your CD drive or perhaps the speed of your network. While you're waiting, this is an excellent opportunity to check out the other consoles available during the installation process. Specifically, press Alt F2 or Alt F3 to access command line consoles. Alt F4 accesses a log of installation messages, which is updated as installation proceeds. If you explore the command line console, be aware the Ubuntu installation is written during the installation process to the target directory, literally, as you can see from the output to the ls target command. Once the basic installation process is complete, you're prompted to set and configure a regular user account. After that point, you'll configure apt for network access to other packages. Configuring apt requires configuring a proxy server. If you don't have a proxy server regulating access from your network to the internet, just leave this option blank. Once configured, apt loads information from the Ubuntu repository or repositories associated with the country selected at the beginning of the installation process. In my case, I selected US, which means that installation packages are located and loaded from the us.archive.ubuntu.com server. If the connection is successful, installation proceeds normally, and the time it takes depends on the speed of your system, and more importantly on the speed of the network connection to the Ubuntu country mirror. Once the package installation process is complete, you'll see the following steps. The system clock on most Ubuntu Linux systems should be set to UTC, which essentially means Greenwich Mean Time. It assumes your hardware clock is set to Greenwich Mean Time, and that's an excellent option, especially if you're configuring a group of Ubuntu servers in different locations, so you can keep their systems in sync. But that won't work if the system you're installing is in a dual boot configuration with an operating system like Microsoft Windows, as Windows can't handle UTC. Once you make your selection here, installation is complete. Once you enter Continue, the system reboots and then starts your Ubuntu Linux system. Thank you, and in the next video, we'll look at the unique bits associated with the Ubuntu server installation program. Highlights of the Ubuntu server installation. This video is focused on the unique features of the Ubuntu server installation process. The Ubuntu server, assuming you're starting the installation process from the Ubuntu server CD, can only be installed in text mode. The unique part of the server installation process is shown here, where you're allowed to select from several different typical software package groups. The options include a DNS server. If you select this option, you get the domain name service, the server based on the Berkeley Internet name domain. A LAMP server is sort of a group of groups, where LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Apache is the standard web server for Linux, and by far the most popular web server on the Internet. MySQL, where SQL stands for Structured Query Language, is a database system. PHP is a scripting language. These components are often put together on modern web servers. They're integrated and fulfill the functionality requirements of many web servers. On some systems, Perl or Python, other scripting languages, are used in place of PHP. Since they all start with P, it's still a LAMP stack. If you select a mail server, you get the default mail server for Ubuntu Linux, which is Postfix. I usually install the OpenSSH server on all my Ubuntu server systems, as it enables remote administration. The PostgreSQL server is an alternative to MySQL. If you select a print server, the default print server for Ubuntu Linux is CUPS, the Common Unix Print System. Finally, the Samba file server enables communication with other Linux, Unix, and Microsoft Windows systems. Specifically, it enables file and print sharing. Depending on the servers you select, additional questions may be asked during the installation process. One of the advantages of the Ubuntu server installation is that only ports associated with the server are actually opened. All other ports on that server are secure because they're closed. Thank you, and on to the next chapter of videos.